Welcome everybody. We're here live under the mat radio at the almost to the day to get hiatus. This is your host Tech. I know I look a little different, less hair, more weight, in pain. Here for a great interview, Skype in the year 2023. Thank you for your time. Today's date is March the 23rd, 2023. Time is 7:49 p.m. Eastern Time. Here live with our great correspondent, returning Saltine. How you feeling?
Feeling great. Get your ass whipped. Y'all remember that one. Welcome back,
Uh-huh.
everyone, and welcome back to me.
Festival with the bright green in the back. Down below to
Yep.
my right could be your left, depending on how you're looking. Is our man, a great editor, also correspondent. XO, what's going on, brother?
What's good? Nothing much is going on, folks. How everybody doing? Welcome back. I don't know which way you are, but welcome back, Saltine. Wherever you
Yes, we are over the place, but it's all right.
right. All right.
So good. Of course, I'm here. And we're gonna bring in momentarily a great guest that we have is a world-renowned author. This man has covered soccer. Shout out to my international friends. Their football, we call it soccer. They call it football. Great author, lover of pro wrestling. He's a great author of the WMAC Masters history book that is out. Great guy, fun guy. We're bringing in none other than Kristopher Landis. We'll bring him in 1 second, and we'll be having him on for the duration of this interview. Do you want to give a quick update for our social media? For some reason, our social media on Twitter has got locked. For some reason, Twitter decided after having the page for 8 years that we wasn't fitting the age restrictions. We were not over 13 years old. So our Twitter is at tech, TECH underscore UTMR. Our Twitter page should be up by the latest on Monday. So do note, if you do check our Twitter page, you can't find us. That is why I had to send verification for some odd reason. Of course, follow us on YouTube and on Facebook and on IG, Instagram at Under the Mat Radio. And without any further ado, we bringing the man himself, Kristopher Landis. This is Kristopher, not with a C, but with a K.
Yes.
How you feeling, Chris?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I got two little ones who are upstairs, so you can probably hear them coming kind of over the mic. So a little bonus guest for you guys today. But I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here talking about the show and the book. I'm very proud of the book we wrote, and I love talking about the show. So I'm excited.
Good. Shout out to the little Landis. Shout out to both of them. Shout out to Mrs. Landis too. Definitely thank them for your time. I'm gonna turn it over now to Saltine to start things off.
Oh man, my first question is, what made you invest yourself to write a book about WMAC Masters? I think it's rare for us to find somebody who does research on a show that we all remember. I mean, Ted remember, Bobby Exo, probably Exo remember because he been around like, like ninja stuff and everything. So, he been a fan. So what made you want to do it? Like, that's really cool. And it's really rare for someone to do that.
Yeah, well, I had written a novel, a murder mystery novel, the year before, and gone through the process of getting it published, signing with a publisher. Things were going great. It was selling really well, and then when it when it came time for the publisher to pay anybody who was working for him, me, his editors, anybody, he literally fled the country to avoid having to pay anyone. So I was
Wow.
at the point of as a writer, I should say, where I was like, I can't invest another 2 years, 3 years into doing another novel right now. Mentally, emotionally, I just couldn't do it. And so I was a fan of WMAC Masters as a kid. I was 7, 8 years old when it was on. I was the target demographic. I loved pro wrestling. I loved the Power Rangers. I loved Saturday morning cartoons. I was who they were talking to. So of course I loved it. And it stuck with me. And as I kind of grew older and grew more mature, as I grew older, grew more mature, it always kind of stuck with me that it ended on this cliffhanger. That never sat right with me, because like everybody, I wanted to know. And so I was sitting there, heartbroken by how this novel went, thinking I've got to do something different. And I was watching on YouTube and someone had uploaded the whole series. So of course I watched it. And at the end of it, I was like, man, someone should really, someone should find out what was supposed to happen. So I did some Google foo, and no one had ever written about it. So I started kind of cold emailing anyone I could find, any of the cast who still had a karate school. And that ended up being a lot of them. It ended up being a lot of them, and the first person who responded to me was Kris Casamassa. And at the time, I had no idea what I was really going to do. I thought maybe it could be like a blog article or a series of blog articles, something to put on Medium and maybe just kind of boost my profile as a writer, and get some eyeballs on my stuff. I didn't know at the time that every single person I talked to was going to introduce me to someone else. So I talked to Kris Casamassa. He said, you should reach out to Herb. Here's how to get in touch with Herb. Herb put me in touch with Dan Hupp. Dan ended up being one of my biggest resources. And it just kind of went this way, that way, this way, that way. And eventually I ended up interviewing all of the cast except for 4 or 5 people, all of the major crew, like the writers, the producers, the editors, all the creative people. And I was able to find out just about almost everything there was to find out.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Wow. Tech, you have a question for him?
I want to mention this, and then I'll turn it to EXO. We all grew up with the show. Kris, you and I have been talking nonstop every day since since the beginning off air. EXO, I know you're big into martial arts and Saltine. Starting with you first, Kris, then EXO, then Saltine and me. Let us know, Kris, your first initial memory of WMAC Masters. What was the first episode? Who did you first see? Your first thoughts? Like, what the hell is this? You tell us about that.
This actually is the intro to the book, because I don't remember my first memory of it. I can't, when I think back, WMAC Masters was just there. It was just a part of my childhood. I don't remember flipping channels and seeing it. I know logically that it was on after WWF on Saturday morning, so I probably just caught it right after that. But I couldn't tell you what episode it was. I couldn't tell you who fought. I just can tell you that I was immediately obsessed. I had the figures. I had the VHS tapes. But hand to God, I couldn't tell you what the first thing I saw was because it just so ingrained in me that it's like it was always there.
Wow, that's really dope. I remember when WMAC Master, it used to come on Saturday morning, I remember, but it was on 54 before it changed to CW. WB, but here in Baltimore, it would be on WBMUV TV 54. That's when they showed the show. But for the second question, due to your research on WAMC Masters, what was the process you had to go through to find everyone from that show? Was there any agents you had to call, email, or did you know somebody that knew them?
I knew no one going in. It was all cold going in. Like I was saying, it kind of became, hey, I'll put you in touch with this person. Here's this person's phone number. Here's this person's email address. And that's really why I had success, because with every interview, Jamie Webster would put me in touch with Johnny Lee Smith because they're real life friends. Isaac Florentine, the director, world famous director, by the way. I didn't know martial arts cinema really coming into this, and after the fact I got to know more and more. I'm like, holy shit, I was talking to Isaac Florentine, what? But he gave me this giant list of people's phone numbers and emails, and that's who got me in touch with Willie the Bam Johnson, who became a mentor to me, local to your guys' area. That's how I got in touch with Norman Grossfeld, the guy who wrote and produced the show. So it really, really was, by and large, kind of word of mouth. And when word of mouth failed, it was a lot of, investigative reporting. It was doing public record searches. It was trying to find old websites that might have contacts. It was IMDb. If you sign up for IMDb Pro, anybody who's active in the industry probably has their agent's contact info. So I didn't end up having to go through agents all that often. The only one I had to go through agents for were actually all people who didn't choose to take part, who were all kind of peripheral to the show, like your William Zabka, who was the co-host on the original pilot. They ended up reshooting Taimak, who the less is said about Taimak, the better. And,
You understand?
and
Oh.
so even Shannon Lee, Bruce Lee's daughter, host of the show, I was able, after a lot of trying different places, I was able to get in touch with her directly through the Bruce Lee Foundation. She ended up being too busy to take part in the book, but she wished it well, kind of. I don't want to say gave it her blessing because she didn't explicitly say that, but she said she'd be interested. We just couldn't work out a time. So, it was really kind of, until someone told me no, I was going to keep digging until I got in contact with them. And eventually time ran out and I had to kind of give up on a couple folks. But overall, it was just people introducing me and then doing the digging like you would as a reporter.
Wow, that's really messed up. So Taimak was not a person you really don't want to meet, basically.
I don't want to. I'm sure they're a fine person in day-to-day life. My attempts to contact them were not fruitful. I emailed different agents, different email addresses, and my sister-in-law, who knows nothing about martial arts, nothing about WMAC Masters. She's the sweetest girl in the world. She's shy, she's awkward, like me, but more shy. She was going to a convention in Florida where she's from that Taimak was going to be at, and I emailed her a letter just to print off and give to him, just introducing myself and the project. And he basically big leagued her and tried to embarrass her. And if you want to big league me, that's fine. I'm a writer. I'm a professional. I can handle it. This girl doesn't know who you are. She doesn't care. She's just trying to do, her brother-in-law a favor. So I don't take it personally when people tell me no, but I took that personally.
But he was on
Sorry about that.
he was doing another interview. What's that guy name? He's not even in my mind right now. But I think he was doing an interview with somebody, and I was like, oh, so he did his interview, but he can do talk to you.
Yeah.
That's really
Well, I
funny.
don't
Vlad.
know. I don't know if he knew or not, but I've actually seen the unaired pilot episode that he was like the central figure in, and I write about it in the book. And he was bad. It was his efforts were better
bad.
off with the show we got than the show they were trying
Yeah.
to do in the pilot.
Yeah,
And
I watched that.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Wow.
It was bad. I watched it. Definitely didn't feel the glow at all. Sometimes, and I want to commemorate you, Kris, and set off air is us doing this for over a decade. Your persistence shows where you got to keep pushing and pushing till you get a no. Sometimes you get a no, then it's a maybe, then it's a yes. So the show that early about the persistence that you had and the hard work you did to make this book definitely shows, your passion and shows the hard work that you've done. EXO, tell us your first memory of WMAC Masters and start off with your question.
So, when I first seen WMAC Masters, I felt like I was looking at a mixture between Dark Shadows and Black Belt Theater. It was just like a soap opera, but with like a competition. So it was like Mortal Kombat meets Young and the Restless. Like, and for some reason, Shao Kahn is fucking Victor Numa or something like that. That's how I looked at it. I felt like that, and I'm like, yo, this shit is. And so I grew up in that family where grandma was looking at the soaps, and it just so happens that I like Young and the Restless and Bold and the Beautiful because I grew up on it. So so seeing WMAC, yeah, there we go. See Victor Newman, like every time something happened in General City, who did it? Victor Newman. Like, come on, like Ultimate's going to get that, but let me stay on course. But like, so it was like the perfect combination with that and martial arts. And I just remember me and my brothers like constantly, like every time it would come on, like Rad the Wrestling, which was literally the perfect time slot. Like that energy is still hype. You just got finished seeing somebody get slammed. Now you seeing somebody get spin kicked. It was a perfect combination. And the one character I remember was Wizard. I believe it was Wizard, the one that did all the was it Wushu? I believe it was him. Yeah. That's the one that got me.
Wizard came in season 2, wore silver. He did karate. Warlock wore the kind of midnight blue silk pajama looking things. He did Kung Fu, which is adjacent to Wushu. So
yeah, there we go. So that was the one. That's him right there. Yeah, and I always used to be able to try to do the kicks. Like I used to try to mimic the kicks.
The machine gun kick. Yeah.
It was one time I actually did it, and I kicked a statue.
Oh,
that was in the kitchen. Oh yeah. Of course I got in trouble. Why wasn't I?
Of course, yeah.
It makes sense. Perfect sense. You're sitting in there doing all these damn kicks, and then pow, and just fell on the floor. I'm like, well, I just sat in the room, threw the belt on the bed, what's getting ready? We all know what's getting ready to happen here. Let's not fight this one. So, but it's definitely a good show. The one question that I had for you was, during this whole process of getting this together, and this is, I'm pretty sure it was a mammoth undertaking, because this is something when Tech told me about it, I was like, wait, somebody did something. Dude, I fucking love WMAC Masters. It's someone's actually doing this shit. Did you experience those moments of frustration, you know what? Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Maybe these I don't know, man. I'm trying not to get locked up. Let me just not no more.
Well, during the actual creation of the book, I didn't really struggle with that as much. I'm very blessed to be a stay-at-home writer dad. My wife is the primary breadwinner, and I stay home and take care of the kids, and I write when I can. At the time, we only had one, which allowed for a lot more writing time. And I was so overwhelmed by the support of the cast and crew that my spirits didn't really flag too much during that time. Because, when Hakeem the Machine Alston is telling you what you're doing is important, you should be very proud of what you're doing, it's kind of hard to not, feel good about it. I can tell you with 100% honesty and no false humility, in the time since the book has come out, I have felt very down, very what have I, because for the longest time, up until right around Christmas time, I was in the red on the book. We hadn't even made our money back on the book because we're entirely self-published, entirely self-financed. Right now, we've just peaked our head above breaking even. But, it was a really big undertaking, and it was a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of money. And it's a very niche thing, and it's very hard to find people who remember the show in general, and people who remember the show a lot of the times they're movie people, not necessarily readers, and that's a bummer for the guy who wrote a book. So in the month since the book came out, I've experienced more than my share of downs, just feeling like, why did I choose this was a waste of time. Now I have these 2 kids, I don't have any time to write. I could have done something else. But, when you have the other week, I had someone from the Netherlands message me on Twitter saying that they were a fan of the show since way back. They were one of the people back then who tried to document as much as they could online. And they were one of the people who made a lot of the notes that I used. And they thanked me for doing the book to kind of bring stuff full circle. And so those moments really kind of counteract the bad and remind you why you did what you did. People telling you thank you for that, the cast saying, hey, thanks for keeping it alive. It's very humbling, but it's also really encouraging.
Good. That's what's up. So my next question is, what do you hope to accomplish with this book? What is the one, that defining reason, the driving force, this is what I want to come out of this book?
When I first started it, I wanted to be able to give the fans closure on what was supposed to happen, and getting the story for season 3, I did that. As I continued to write and as it grew, and as I realized how important the show was to the people who made it and how much they cared about what they were trying to teach, the goal for me kind of changed into honoring that and preserving the stories, and kind of making sure that the show for, people are going to remember it however they want, but there'll be a record of how the people who made it felt. Some people will watch it and go, it was cheesy, lame 90s shtick. And it was cheesy in parts and it was lame in parts, but it was so much more than that. And it mattered a lot to the people who made it. And I think giving the fans the closure was the one big thing. And then kind of preserving the legacy of the show. A chapter in there is dedicated to Richard Brandon, who played Yin Yang Man. He passed away from cancer years ago, so I never got to talk to him. He was universally beloved. He was the best human. Everyone just raved about him. And if you watch the show, he's a background character. And so to me, once I started kind of learning those stories, learning how much the fighters cared about making sure kids knew what martial arts was supposed to be, it kind of grew to encompass, my goal kind of grew to encompass, making sure that I preserved their words and honored that legacy more than anything.
Thank you for that. Swamp Team?
Oh, wow. Me. Here's
Hey,
a
we
question.
we do want to give a shout out to Yin Yang Man, who passed away, I think, from doing research pancreatic cancer. Definitely send our condolences to him. Definitely a great guy. And I remember him too. So just want to give a shout out. Go with something.
All right, Kris, you mentioned about WMAC Masters had connection with wrestling.
Yes.
What was the connection with that?
All right, I'm glad everyone's sitting down because you're not going to believe this. I didn't believe it at first either. WMAC Masters was almost the World Martial Arts Federation, and it was almost funded and produced by Vincent Kennedy McMahon and Titan Sports.
Really?
Wow.
100% true. Bruce Pritchard, in the early days of his podcast with Conrad Thompson, told a story about how in the early 90s they were going to do this martial arts thing. And I'm like, that sounds like WMAC Masters. And when I was interviewing the creators and stuff, I got some kind of different responses. Did you guys ever talk to Vince? And one of the guy who basically financed WMAC Masters as it was is a guy named Al Khan, no relation to Tony, yada, yada, yada. But he worked with Vince for years and years and years. And he's like, oh, yeah, I talk to Vince all the time. But no, we never took it to him. And so I was like, okay, that ends that. But then I talked to Carlin West, who is the woman who actually came up with the original concept and took it to Al. She's like, oh, no, I took it to Vince. And we were going to do it. And I worked with I was lucky to get some help from a prominent wrestling journalist named David Bixenspan, who he's a great researcher. And he just kept sending me so much information that I wouldn't have access to through these databases and all sorts of arcane stuff. I don't really know where he got it from. And there were press releases talking about Titan Sports, the launches, the World Martial Arts Federation. And like, this was much more than a couple conversations, which is how it was kind of related. He goes, oh, we had some conversations, but they didn't feel it was right. They actually got to the point where they were getting ready to shoot, and then Vince backed out. I think, and obviously no one could confirm this for me, but I think it's because the World Bodybuilding Federation blew up in his face, and he didn't want to try another combination of fake sports entertainment with another type of sport. So it was almost a WWF co-production, so to speak. And then later on, after they signed with Bandai, Bandai, the toy company, ended up financing the show in part during season 1. They were going to launch a spin-off pro wrestling. So it was going to be called Ring Warriors. And it was going to be a kind of pro wrestling show. Basically, it was going to be run by Howard Brody, who ran NWA Florida for a long time. He co-wrote Dusty Rhodes' biography, or ghost wrote it. And it was going to be a kind of an offshoot of New Japan with Hiro Matsuda, who Howard Brody was very close to. Bandai and WMAC's relationship went south, and I document all that in the book. And basically, when Bandai pulled their funding from WMAC, obviously that killed any potential spinoffs, but Howard Brody kept it going through various iterations, and it actually stayed in various forms of production until I think 2016. Karrion Kross, I think, was their last champion. So that was another kind of sideways connection, kind of second cousins, as it were.
Wow, wow. The mighty Khans.
Crazy.
Always a Khan involved with something.
Always.
Alcon is most famous probably on these shores for bringing a little something called Pokemon to America. So
Gotta catch 'em all.
if you wanna be a bigwig, he brought Pokemon, he brought Yu-Gi-Oh, he brought all that stuff.
Wow, that's very education. I did not know that he's a legend now in my book.
It was
for
very
bringing
intimidating
Pokemon.
to interview him. Like it was an audio only interview, thankfully. But I got his assistant. This is like, you got 30 minutes, make it count. I'm like, all right, yeah.
Oh man, we had them kind of interviews. Holy moly. Tech.
You mentioned about connection with wrestling. Are you, Kris, a wrestling fan? If
Oh, yeah.
so,
Lifelong.
what are some of your favorites?
Lifelong wrestling fan, always have been. Took some time away as a teenager, but I'm definitely back. My all-time favorite is Sting. My son actually shares a birthday with Sting, which just makes me the happiest dad in the world.
Happy
Sting,
birthday.
Great Muta, Jushin Liger, those guys are kind of my favorite way back. CM Punk was my favorite kind of in my teenage years because I was a big Ring of Honor kid. They came to Dayton, Ohio a lot, so I saw Punk and Joe and AJ and Danielson and all those guys kind of in person back then. Yeah, it's just it's kind of ingrained in me at this point. I'm a big AEW guy these days just because, the WWE stuff kind of didn't appeal to me anymore. I know several people in WWE. I've become friends with them through the book and stuff. Shout out to Xavier Woods, who's as big of a WMAC fan as you can be. But AEW is kind of where my wrestling viewing lies these days. Mike Bailey, who's an independent wrestler, Speedball Mike Bailey, he's the nicest human in the world. I hope some big company signs him up. I met him through this. He's an actual Taekwondo black belt, and he's big influenced by WMAC Masters. So if you don't know Speedball Mike Bailey, viewers, go watch him. He's getting ready to tear it up WrestleMania weekend on the Collective.
Oh yeah, yep.
Now, you being a
Crazy.
wrestling fan, are you a martial arts fan? And if you are, name some of the, besides Bruce Lee, because we know Bruce Lee is like the GOAT,
Sure.
to a lot of people. If you are in the martial arts, so you're some of your favorite martial artists and some of your favorite martial arts movies, and after this, I'll turn it to XO. I know this is
I actually am not a huge martial arts fan, not a huge martial arts cinema fan. WMAC Masters was kind of all I knew of the martial arts world. And it was like doing this book kind of was my introduction to kind of that world. Like I said, Master Bam, Willie the Bam Johnson really kind of took me under his wing. I got to sit under his learning tree and meet so many amazing people. And my respect for that kind of, they call it the traditional martial arts world to differentiate it from like mixed martial arts and the UFC style stuff. But the traditional martial arts world, it's just such a deep and, sorry, I'm getting stuffy, not crying. My kids are booger factories right now. But I've really learned a lot about the kind of technical side of how they shoot martial arts footage in cinema and how they did it in the 90s, how they do it now, and getting to sit and listen to guys like Willie the Bam Johnson, Kid Carmichael Simon, who has gone on to do just dozens of different things from tricking to choreography, fight choreography, kind of all over the place. So my knowledge of martial arts cinema is pretty nil still. I don't have time to watch movies these days, but my respect for martial arts and the traditional martial arts has just gone through the roof, and I will gladly sit and listen to those guys and girls talk all day long.
Good, XO.
So, by you being around, like, through WMAC, obviously they also exposed you to the wrestling world. Now, from your knowledge, has there ever been a moment where, WMAC, they had their own action figure line and stuff like that, different accessories you could purchase? Has there ever been talks of a WMAC game?
Video game.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
They were in discussions for it when the show got canceled. When the show didn't continue, got canceled is a bit harsh. There were rumors floating around the internet that they had done the motion capture and stuff like Mortal Kombat style. That's not true. They had never got that far. They had never signed any deals.
I knew it. I knew it was Mortal Kombat.
They had never signed any deals or anything. It was obviously, the idea of doing a fighting game was a no-brainer, and they had enough brains to go for the no-brainer. But it was one of those things that they wanted to license. They wanted to license everything. Bandai really looked at it as a licensing opportunity. They wanted to license party cups. They wanted to license paper plates. They wanted to license bed sheets. They wanted to do it all. And they never got there because of creative differences. And the video game, unfortunately, never came to fruition. Another thing that they were working on in that kind of realm, not a fighting game, but if you guys remember in the 90s, like Encarta Encyclopedia, those interactive encyclopedia games, they were working on a WMAC encyclopedia that was like a history of martial arts, and it was going to have these storyline bits in it, and it was going to have video, and that actually was a kind of nothing ever got made, but they were working on assets for it, so that actually was going to be a thing and probably had more of a shot of seeing the light of the day than a fighting game in a kind of oversaturated market at that time.
That would have been dope too, and I kind of feel like. See, I when I look at like as far as branding is concerned, and with WMAC Masters, by it being like at the height of its fame around that time, being something like totally unique because you never seen nothing like that. I'm like, we got the action figure, didn't get the game. Was there even a comic book in the mentions at all?
I don't remember there being any talk of a comic book at the time. I'm sure that if it had been brought up and doable, they would have done it in a heartbeat. When the show ended after 2 seasons, they looked at a lot of different ways to potentially keep it going. I know that comic book was brought up but dismissed just because you got to remember these are real life people using their real names, and the show, they would have had to get a lot of different agreements from each individual actor, martial artist, to use them in the comic. And then he's got, well, I don't want my guy doing this, and because you're not actually acting it out, it would have created a lot more problems. I did hear in conversations with someone, and it's not something I can really get into too much because I might have had to sign some paperwork saying I'm not allowed to dig in too much, but a comic book is maybe possibly it's an idea that has been floated in the past. I don't know the status of it now, but in the past it was floated as an idea of a way to bring the property back in advance of maybe trying to do a reboot. Obviously that hasn't happened. I don't know if it will happen, if it's still trying to be made happen. I know there are people who want to make the show come back. But the comic book was brought up as an idea, as a way to kind of pave the road for that and tell the story of what would have happened back then to get us to where the Masters are now, because obviously it's been 25 years.
Yeah, it's been a very long time. If the opportunity ever came, and clearly, it's like you said, you don't have time to follow, look at TV shows and stuff like that. WMAC Masters was your first introduction into the martial arts world.
Yeah.
But because you have some kind of working knowledge of it, from hearing the descriptions, what would be the martial arts style that you would gravitate towards? Like, if you had the opportunity, like, hey, you get the opportunity to learn a fighting style, which one would it be?
I probably would go, and I'll give you my answer and I'll tell you why I chose that. I would probably do Wushu, because we kicked off the book at the U.S. Capitol Classics Martial Arts Tournament in Washington, D.C. last year. Master Bam invited me out. A few of the different masters came out to help us kick it off, but I was a guest of Master Bam and his family, and they are the most wonderful people. And I got to spend a lot of time seeing Master Bam and his school and his kids that he teaches. And every single one of those kids, man, had so much self-belief and so much confidence. And as someone who's struggled with self-confidence my entire life, I look at that and I say, I want my kids to have that. So in a heartbeat, I would sign us up for daddy-daughter, daddy-son wushu classes at a place like the BAM, as long as it has that same spirit. As far as styles, I took a year of Taekwondo as a kid because I wanted to be Olympus. But, it's more about trying to find that spirit of growth and harmony that I experienced. And not that his school was the only one that had it, but it was the vibe I got overwhelmingly from them.
That was great.
Wow. That's
I was
cool.
going. I was going to ask you a great question, actually, about what martial art you specifically would want to learn. Now, besides Master Bam, who did you feel the most connected to throughout the research to the book and learning about the book?
Sure.
And I know the whole cast is great.
Yeah.
But who did you find yourself surprisingly like, hey, this male and female, shout out to the female cast because it was great female masters as well and WMAC Masters as well, which people forgot or don't really mention. Who did you feel surprisingly most connected to you besides Master Bam?
Jamie Webster, Great Wolf. He's like your crazy uncle or grandpa, and I probably talked to him for longer than anyone because he would call me when he had a day off and he had his grandkids there with him, and we would talk for like 3 hours, and he would tell stories, and he would kind of go off on these tangents, and then hold on, let me bring it back, and it was like talking to an uncle, and he just had so much wisdom, and his perspective was so unique because he's a country boy from Alabama, but he is actually Cherokee. He's actually Native American. So that wasn't a character he was playing. That was him. And so we really got to dig into kind of the representation of it and how he felt about it then and how he feels about it now and how proud he was to get to play a strong, positive role model for Native Americans and not, a crappy stereotypical Indian, so to speak, for the audio only listeners, I just did air quotes around that. Getting to talk to him was just very cool because we talked about our families, and I did that with Master Bam as well. But you said besides Master Bam, we really got to know each other. And he came out to DC all the way from Alabama just to help me. He brought his costume. He brought, his kids. Like it was just such a surreal experience and very incredibly humbling. And then I'd say him and Master Bam and Kid Carmichael Simon. We didn't talk as often or as long, but he really helped me a lot on the understanding of the sport martial arts world because he's still heavily involved in that. Master Bam does what he does because he loves it and he wants to help the kids. They compete, but it's more about helping the kids. Carmichael still heavily involved in Team Paul Mitchell, which is a highly successful martial arts team. So he helped me kind of get my foot in the door of that world and better understand that world and what kind of moves the people that way. Because as a novice, I don't really know,
He was great. I know for me, well, all of us living in Baltimore, from Baltimore in the city, WMAC Masters, as Exo said, and Saltine came on WNUV TV 54. It came on right after Superstars. Sometimes Superstars came on at 12 o'clock. WMAC Masters would come on at 1. Then they moved it to like 10 a.m. And then WCW Worldwide came on. Yep. And I first saw it was like these karate people, this medallion. I'm like, what the hell is this? Then I saw the machine, the black guy. I was like, wait, there's a black guy with dreads with a scouter like Dragon Ball Z. So I'm like, what is happening here? But it was cool. And I saw the little putty guys, the wushu, the kabuki guys.
Yeah.
That's the way. Is this like Power Rangers? But it was cool because I first saw it. I first saw the machine. I saw Grey Wolf. I saw Shannon Lee, who I didn't know was Bruce Lee's daughter.
Yeah.
I thought maybe I found out later, but I thought maybe they was just using the name Lee because it was martial arts because of Bruce.
Right.
And then I saw who was it? It was the Machine, and what was his name? Luke Kane, the guy that played Luke Kane.
Oh, Superstar.
Ho-Pak Sang, yes. Those are the first 3 guys I saw. And it was somebody sitting on top of the throne. I was like, this guy sitting in the chair, like I knew automatically watching Kung Fu movies, he must be the master. And I thought it was cool that these guys, they fought Universal Studios, thinking of the time of wrestling, WCW Worldwide with the studio, and they had these after school like specials trying to talk positive with kids. So that really drew me in. And I watched it every weekend. It was My weekend lineup was Saturday morning cartoons, WCW Worldwide, WMAC Masters, and WWF Superstars, which came
Yeah.
on at 4 p.m. And then we're not even going to talk about later in years, do season 2 of WMAC Masters. After WCW Masters came on, they moved the time slot. We had to suffer through VIP and all those low rent RoboCop series and all them bad shows. So
Yeah.
that was Saturday mornings meant a lot, for us
Yeah.
and watching that show. Now, I want to say also for you, what else did you learn for as I mean, you and I joke a lot off air about the medallions. What medallion do you feel more tied into? Because I love the fact with the show, everything was tied into the discipline. How it was an intro.
Yeah.
Red Dragon did this, and Yin Yang Man, and the
Yeah.
Machine did this, and um, Tsunami, and
Yeah.
all the different guys. Which medallion do you feel was your favorite since you did your research?
That's a really great question. I don't know. I'll have to think about that one. While I stall and try to figure out my answer, I will say that in the book, pretty early on, I was given a sheet of they had some unused key symbols, the medallions. There were some unused symbols in there from characters that never actually made the show, and that's one of the moments where I do, oh shit, like this. I'm not just gonna get the surface level stories here. People have kept stuff, so that was one of the first like oh god moments. As far as what key symbol I feel most drawn to, Olympus was my favorite as a kid. Um, I still feel like, the Olympic torch, him being a real Olympic gold medalist, and the fact that he wrote the introduction for the book, he didn't have to do that. He didn't ask for anything, any money. He said, yeah, when you need it by, I'll get you. And so he did that just to show support. So probably I think the Machines is probably the coolest looking. But so those would be my two answers. I think. I should have said Kid Carmichael because it's just a big K and my name's spelled with a K. Oh,
Yeah,
that was
shout out to
easy.
Kid.
Edit this
Yeah.
out and just make me sound really smart and say that. Okay, now leave it all in. It's fine.
Shout out to Kid Carmichael. Uh, to people that that maybe listen to this as straight audio or that's watching video, may not realize that WMAC Masters has a tie-in. You gotta think about the '90s. So we have fans all over the world, fans of all different generations. You have the people that are, you have the different 4 kids that are like 12 or 13 that don't know what we're talking about. Even the people that's 21, 22, people like us, the late 30s, the early 40s, and people that's older. When you think about the 1990s TV, you got the Ninja Turtles, you got the Power Rangers, American Gladiators, which was another great show. All ties into WMC Masters. So you got pro wrestling, Power Rangers, the Ninja Turtles, American Gladiators, also ties into the great Michael Jai White and a whole bunch of other great actors that went on to the people in the show. Mortal Kombat, the video game.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat 2. It's so much stuff that this show has ties and links to. So if you can talk a little bit about that, Kris, to our fans
Yeah.
that may not know and purchasing the book will get a better understanding of it.
Yeah. So WMAC Masters really was connected to pretty much every popular franchise of the '90s in some way. Power Rangers is probably the biggest. Well, Power Rangers and Mortal Kombat, but I'll start with Power Rangers because a lot of people came directly from Power Rangers to WMAC Masters through Isaac Florentine, the director. Isaac got brought on board, and he brought along Eric Betts, who played Panther, Ian Nguyen, who played Tsunami, Bridget Riley, who played Baby Doll, and those guys and girls were all stunt doubles and putty patrollers in the original run of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So the first 2 seasons. Sophia Crawford was also involved. She was a stunt double on the Power Rangers movie. Richard Brandon was a stunt double. So there's a giant, just the whole crew, like a third of the crew came from another Bandai property, WMAC Masters. They came from Power Rangers to WMAC Masters. A lot of every once in a while in those Power Rangers episodes, you'll see Bridget Riley as Bulk and Skull's girlfriend. You'll see Eric Betts with giant dreads as one of their lackeys, you know, and they're playing the Putty Patrollers and they're playing the team in the suits for the fight scene in the American shot stuff. So, pardon me. And then later on, Wizard, who came in season 2, Mike Chadnarama, and he goes by Mike Chat now. Later on in the 2000s, he would actually play a Blue Ranger in, I think, Lightspeed Rescue, one of those. And then Yuji Noguchi, who played Cyclone, he was the guy in the wheelchair in season 2 because he broke his leg. He is still to this day the main fight choreographer for the Power Rangers franchise. So just the connections are deep and plentiful. Mortal Kombat, the most obvious one is Ho-Sung Pak, Superstar. He was the original Liu Kang in Game 1 and Game 2 before the lawsuits happened. There's a fantastic book by David Craddock who just came out this year. It's about the history of the Mortal Kombat games. Highly, highly recommended. If you're a fan of Mortal Kombat, it goes into the nitty-gritty of the hows, the whys, the game got made, why people left, why they changed. It's like, if you think mine's in depth, this guy went like below the surface in depth. I was in awe of it. But so Ho-Sung was the original Liu Kang. The Mortal Kombat movie came out kind of adjacent to WMAC Masters. Pat Johnson, who was the famous fight choreographer, director of Karate Kid and stuff, he did the fight scenes there. He was on WMAC season 1. Machine obviously played the warrior monk who gets his soul snatched by Shang Tsung, and Red Dragon, Chris Casamassa, played Scorpion in the 2 Mortal Kombat movies. That's probably what he's most well known for to this day, much to my chagrin, because I think Red Dragon's better, but whatever, not my problem. Kid Carmichael and Hakeem the Machine both also played in the Mortal Kombat Live tour after the WMAC Masters was over. American Gladiators, that's kind of an adjacent one. Eric Betts went on American Gladiators as a contestant, won on there. And also the original footage, kind of a proof of concept is what they call it. They shot a couple fights at Universal California to kind of, this is what we want to do. And they took it to try to get sponsors. And Michael Jai White was in that, as well as the guy who played Malibu in the original American Gladiators. And so they played characters that fought on the Waterworld set. Unfortunately, that footage, if it survives, no one knows where it is. But yeah, so that was kind of the connection there. After the show, so many of the cast went on to do a lot of stunt work. Bridget Riley, who played Baby Doll, has been in everything from Watchmen to Grimm to Once Upon a Time. She's been all over the place. You know, Chris Casamassa played Scorpion in the next movie. He played it in the TV series as well. Ho-Sung Pak continues to be an in-demand fight choreographer and stunt director. So, you know, the connections into Hollywood have all kind of continued to this day. Master Bam's daughter was in Wakanda Forever as a stunt performer. So, like, it's a second generation continuing off into the Marvel verse, as it were.
That's great. Kris, I know you have to go. We thank you much for your time. Hopefully we can have you back soon for part 2.
I would love it.
Do you want to give you time, as we call it, the plug party, to
Sure.
go ahead and promote how to get in contact with you, how to purchase your book, anything else that you have, for sale, or as far as businesses or contacts?
Awesome. Well, thank you. You can go to WMACMastersBook.com for links to all the different places you can buy the book. If you don't like Amazon, we got it elsewhere. It is on Amazon, which is obviously the biggest dog. But you can find all the links there. Got links to our Society 6 where you can get the t-shirt. Eventually, we'll have more designs there at some point. I do want to plug, I wanted to do this earlier, but my wife, who... God bless her, she's watching the kids right now. She also is the one who designed the book. So all of the typesetting, all of the little graphics in the book, all the little symbols next to the fighters' names, she designed everything. She put all the pictures in their places. She did all the backgrounds. She helped do the cover art. So she was a huge part of it, not just as a moral support, but she made it look. When I had it done, it was just words, and she made it into something much, much more. So I just want to plug her. Phrasing. I just want to plug her efforts there. And then you can follow us on social media. It is at WMAC Masters Book on Twitter and at Quest for the Dragon Star on Facebook. We're not on Instagram because I'm not good at Instagram. But those are the two places. You can email me, WMACMastersBook@gmail.com if you like. But Twitter is where I'm most active. But I just truly appreciate you guys having me on. I love talking about the show. I love talking about wrestling. But I got to go be a dad. So this has been my little break for the evening, and I very much appreciate you guys.
No problem, Chris. Thank you much for your time. We'll have you back on for part 2.
Love it.
And thank you for being a part of this episode of Under the Mat Radio. Thank you.
Take care.